right. Like, share, subscribe, come be a part of our big tent, our big family, and let's work together to spread the love and come with solutions. We can do this.
And what are you doing it for? Because you want to make America great again. But Priscilla doesn't want to say that because she doesn't want America to be great.
Whatever.
Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I'm here to let you know that Dr. Metzler's at an island resort and the rest of us are not. And I don't even know if I want to put him on camera for that, but contractually speaking, I have to go to him first just because he's at an island and we're not. So Dr. Metzler, go.
Welcome to the island of Guernica. Fascinating island, beaches, birds chirping, you know, those kinds of things. We welcome you to visit anytime. So there you go.
Is this the word that you start saying, come back to Grenada?
No.
No, because you just dated everybody on this show by going to a commercial that came out 40 years ago. Thank you, Priscilla.
Anytime.
People still think I'm 32 years old. Jeff Charles, I see that you got the Dr. Christopher J. Metzler tourist t-shirt on today, but yet you're not at the island. What happened?
I didn't get the invite, but I did get the memo for the shirt, though.
You got to work on that. You get the shirt after you go on the vacation, not before. The shirt.
I went to Grenada and all I got was this silly t-shirt.
Yes, exactly. Jeez. And those shirts have been out for 20 years. We're dating ourselves, and you're still getting it wrong, Priscilla. When men mess up, women fix it. So I'm counting on you to fix this open, please.
I love the style and that you're not just wearing black. The salmon color is very in. I think it makes you guys look more refreshed. It's great against your skin tone. I say 5 snaps and around the world.
What the?
I knew he was going to score you. I knew she was going to score you. And so I'm here to let you know that both of you, proverbially speaking, got a rose. You're going to be on the show next week. Congratulations. One of the folks that may not be on the show much longer is going to be Joe Biden. And the reason why, you love that transition, is because his approval ratings still continue to stay low. The jobs numbers seem to be okay. You have more people 25 for 54 getting into the workforce, but their kids are very scared to go to school. And the president gave another press conference, did another thing in prime time, Dr. Metzler, said all the right things, laid out a public policy proposal that is likely not going to go anywhere by and large, and he seems stuck, for God's sake. And by the way, there's now a drinking game that counts how many times Joe Biden, during a press conference, says, for God's sake. And there was a lot of drunk people this week. Mm-hmm. But there's probably not going to be many solutions that get passed out of this Congress, Dr. Metzler. So where are we? Another mass shooting. We're hearing all these problems coming out of Uvalde as far as how they dealt with it. You know, police officers standing in the hallway where kids are getting killed, and a president that doesn't have a way out with the inflation or the violence in our country.
Well, so there are a couple of things. It reminds me of the fact that they touted this administration as an administration of competence. That was in part of their selling point, number one. And so folks are like, okay, let's, give it a chance. It's the administration of incompetence. My question from a political standpoint, though, is the following. One, is this just Joe Biden being Joe Biden, or is it a completely dysfunctional White House operation? I think it's a combination of both. Susan Rice, domestic policy advisor. Susan, yeah, a lot of domestic policy. Where's the advice? His chief of staff, everyone. What is going on? What are we doing? And it's difficult. The White House press briefings, I listen to those and I'm like, what are we doing? I don't know. And so, you know, for Democrats have to be terrified both about the midterms and about 2024. I again go back to the fact that I don't care what anyone says, Joe Biden is not running in 2024. And so I think you have a lot of people posturing now to see who is going to primary Kamala, because Kamala will not be the nominee. This level of
will she even run? I mean, would she even run?
She will. Her arrogance. And if she didn't run, you know, where would she get the opportunity to cackle? You know, it's there's. I mean, cackling is her brand. It's her message.
By the way, there's two drinking games on Red and Black. One is I digress. The other one is the word cackle. So you all got some drinks in so far today. Go ahead, Dr. Messer.
Yeah, so I just think it's a combination of Joe Biden trying to be Joe Biden. Well, you can't be Joe Biden. You can't remember what happened 20 minutes ago. So you don't know which Joe Biden you're going to be. And it's also a very dysfunctional White House staff. And it's also people who are posturing for whatever power they can get during the next 2 years of his administration. The problem for Democrats running for office, though, is the upcoming shellacking. It gets worse by the day. Well, by the hour, by the minute.
Yeah, but I'm gonna blend two things real quick, Jeff. I mean, word came out of Pennsylvania on Friday that Dr. Oz is the official winner of the U.S. Senate primary for the Republican Party, where Dave McCormick conceded. Now you got John Fetterman, who went from his dad putting him in a perch in Braddock to become Braddock mayor, to foiling the bid of Katie McGinty in 2016 to be a U.S. senator, to then become lieutenant governor 2 years later, to now being the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate, by way of his fame of being 6'8", having tattoos, and being bald, versus a guy that's really never lived in Pennsylvania, by way of Dr. Oz, who's more famous for being this famous doctor that was pretty centrist, even left-leaning in some instances, but endorsed by Trump, so he has to be a MAGA conservative. In a Senate race where Dr. Metzler says that there's going to be shellacking, but you look at purple states like Pennsylvania, and if you had to guess right now, that's going to probably go blue in November. And you have these, you know, the Trump endorsement in Georgia didn't really go very far. So, and that might be another Senate seat that Herschel Walker, all the Republican hopes for that seat are pinned on Herschel Walker. This is not a 3rd and 6. So I don't know if we're going to get the first down or the touchdown on this. So it's this weird spot, and then you still got a president that not a lot of people have confidence in at the head of the ship.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, oh God, don't get me started. I mean, with Dr. Oz, I don't know how that race is going to go, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we get shellacked in that one. But I don't know. I don't get the wisdom of putting someone up, like you said, who barely lives in Pennsylvania, is not a conservative. So there's not going to be a whole lot of differentiation between him and his opponent. So his opponent will probably take it. Now, in Georgia, Herschel Walker is 1 point ahead of Warnock. He has a chance. He does have a good chance of winning, at least right now. Change as time goes on, and he's forced to be in front of the camera more often when they have their debate. I mean, his team has been he's been using the Biden strategy and trying not to get him in front of camera too much, because he has a tendency to expose that he doesn't really know what he's talking about on a lot of issues. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to lose, because we also have to remember Democrats, it hasn't just been Biden who has fouled things up. It's been Democrats in general. When they've had, as they've had control of the House and the Senate, they haven't passed very much in the way of meaningful legislation. And when it comes to November, people are going to be thinking, what have you done for me lately? They're going to be going Janet Jackson on him. And I think there is a good chance that Democrats may just give this election away. So even with Dr. Oz, he may still win, but not because people like him, but because people just don't like Democrats.
Well, it's funny, and I'm going to pivot over to Priscilla. And Priscilla, this is not a comment on you. This is a comment on the politics of today. I'm going to go with another Janet Jackson axiom. You know, it's gotten really nasty. Like that one, right? People from the 80s, holla. Priscilla, and the current nasty politics that we're seeing, you know, we're not seeing a whole bunch of differentiation, and all this is coming about at a time where we're seeing multiple mass shootings. We have now seen 3 in the past 3 weeks. Now this one's a little bit different. There's not a racial bent to it. There was some behavioral health issues going on with the second one. The third one, you know, is this just a guy that was snapped out of his mind because of the pain that he was in? Or, you know, this seems to be really, really random with what happened in Tulsa. But you got that going on, and gas prices continuously hitting record highs after Memorial Day weekend, which means that we now have summer driving kicking into full gear, which means that gas prices are hitting everything from food prices to people in their summer vacations at a time where the politics continues to stay divided. You know, what's going to be the solution? And I'm asking less from a partisan point of view, you got to elect more Republicans, but more from a, these are the things that people need to say or propose or do to move us past. This is a very tight moment of angst right now.
So what it's going to take is talking about the solutions and real, like, how are we going to, in a local level or a state level, reduce the cost of gas? Like the first thing you can impact is taxes. I mean, that you can start to look at where you can shift money, or there's all this COVID relief money that hasn't been used, but it's being used in some places in ways that don't actually help people live more affordably. And it's sitting in buckets in a lot of places, and it's going to programs and things like that that don't actually help everyday Americans. And so our legislators could have, in this past legislative session in our state, done more to help with the cost of, you know, gasoline, and taking a look at how can we reduce income taxes, or, you know, solutions. But we're not hearing that, because what we're hearing are campaign talking points that don't help anybody. And that's why, to Dr. Metzler's point, there's going to be a shellacking, because the average person doesn't keep up with a lot of politics. But what they do see are empty shelves. What they do see is that it's costing them $80 to fill up their gas tank when it used to cost them $30. They're seeing their taxes on their homes go up. They're seeing inflation go up. They're seeing interest rates go up. They can't move because they're like, what am I going to get for the cost of my home? And so if you're someone who is running for office and you are speaking specifically about what your plan is, you have a really great shot, because that's what people are listening for. What are you going to do about these problems?
Dr. Metzler, and Priscilla touches upon a pretty interesting point, which is, you know, we've been talking about baby formula shortages. 2 years ago, it was toilet paper shortages. You know, after the initial surge of COVID, it was meat processing. And as a result of that, meat shortages. We've seen shortages over the last, in essence, 3 years, 2020, 2021, now 2022. Couple that with the gun violence, couple that with the political division, couple that with a war in Ukraine that we're constantly and increasingly paying for. Are we going through a period of time, and I maybe I'm leading into the answer, but are we going into a time where the definition of what it means to have an American experience is being radically changed? And if the answer is yes, what does a collection of good leaders do to remedy that, to get it back to what we think that definition of an American experience should be?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any question that we are, in fact, watering down the American experience. So, you know, that's the reality of it. In terms of what good leaders should do, first and foremost, good leaders need to recognize what the problems are. Instead, too many people running for office are being consumed by the distractions because they consider that to get them more likes, more views, more TV, whatever it is. So they are chasing what is quote unquote hot on Twitter. Twitter does not represent the American public. When you look at your particular neighborhoods, your particular communities, what are those issues, and tell us realistically what the solutions are going to be. And we just don't have a sufficient stable of people, you know, who are running for office who are willing to do that, because they don't know how it's gonna play out. Now, I want to go back to this thing about Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So here's the deal. I think with Herschel, in fact, his team has done a better job of not getting him in front of the cameras. Here's the problem. He has been in front of the cameras long enough. There is enough footage for someone to put together 30-second ads in the general. In the general, he cannot avoid Reverend Warnock. He just can't. That's not gonna fly. So I think Georgia is very tenuous, number one. As it relates to Pennsylvania in particular, I believe is going to go blue. Dr. Oz is simply not going to be able to defeat Fetterman. I just think, you know, that pretty much is over. As it relates to Michigan, the entire slate of Republicans running for governor have just been disqualified by the Michigan Supreme Court. Michigan goes blue again. So I think those are the factors we have to look at. However, I think in some House races, there will be a lacking because, in fact, the House members are not talking to the issues and solutions. What the House members are doing is getting caught up in the social media hype. That spells an absolute disaster, I think, for Democrats.
So as we're looking at this, Jeff, and this all shakes out and we get to a point in time, we have this extra layer on, right? And I want to make sure we cover it. I know this is going to be a shorter version of Red and Black, folks. Like, share, subscribe on the Red State channel. There's a bonus episode coming out again this week. Give you a little bit more juicy stuff to talk about. It's deeper into the culture of what we started talking about last week. But Jeff, you now hear that there's going to be a public hearing to talk about January 6th that apparently they're putting in prime time. And so you have the Peter Navarro arrest. Apparently he was taken into custody on Friday regarding the failure to disclose documents in regards to the January 6th committee and the investigation therein. That is on top of all this other stuff that we're talking about that is causing people a high level of anxiety, geopolitically and nationally. There's two arguments to this. There's either the Priscilla Ron argument, which is people don't want to hear about this when they're spending $5 a pop at the gas tank and they can't find baby formula. The flip side is America is going to hell in a handbasket. You can't count on one layer of American society with a level of comfort. You can't go to church without being fear of being shot. You can't go to a grocery store without a fear of being shot. You can't go to school without a fear of being shot. You can't go to a doctor's office. One of the patients that died at the Tulsa office was just there to be treated, was a bystander doing nothing except trying to go to the doctor's office and ends up getting shot and killed. You have, you're still having incidences of defund the police, failure of the police, and racial incidences with the police that are just not catching the media attention, but they're out there, they're publicized. And now you see this about a president and his followers that are still fighting an election that was decided 2 years ago. There's nothing in America we can count on anymore. So it's like either they're not going to pay attention to the Navarro stuff, Jeff, or this is just something to have even more anxiety over.
You know, but I guarantee you, Lenny, that when these people are sitting down at the dinner table or they're sitting down for breakfast, they're not talking about January 6th. They might be talking about mass shootings. Yeah. And then some people might be talking about the fact that they don't want the government trying to take their guns. I mean, gun sales have already started going up because of this. They might be concerned about Ukraine a little bit, but they're concerned about healthcare more. If you look at all the polling that analyzes people's priorities, January 6th doesn't even make it up there. Crime does. So, I mean, maybe mass shootings would fall under that, but January 6th is nowhere there. And that was a witch hunt from the beginning. People aren't even thinking about that anymore. And nobody's talking about it anymore. But the Democrats, this is an election year and Democrats don't have anything to run on. So, of course.
One pushback. I understand the witch hunt, but I mean, January 6th was real. There was real people there. I'm not discounting that. There were real people talking about lynching. Let's call it what it is, lynching the vice president of the United States. You know, so trying to figure out who was behind it is not necessarily witch hunt. Now, one could say that it was automatically Trump. That could be witch hunting. I get that aspect of it. You can make that.
I think that's what they're trying to do, though, Lenny. I don't see this as a real investigation. First off, I mean, even when Republicans wanted to put certain people on that panel, they rejected them and then put on only anti-Trump people. So to me, that says blatantly that this is political. Yeah, what happened was horrible. Yeah, maybe they should be getting to the bottom of it. The FBI already is. We already know that it wasn't planned beforehand. But yeah, maybe there's some other details that might be important. But we should be seeing this for what it is. It was a horrible thing that happened. And it wasn't as bad as 9/11, like they're saying. But to me, the Democrats are clearly.
Hold on. I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back on that because one could make the argument that in one vein of it, it was worse than 9/11 because an attack on the country from another entity outside the country is obviously bad. It's 3,000 people. That's obviously worse as far as a death toll perspective. The flip side is if you have the type of event that happened on January 6th end up halting the progress of government, which includes a transition of government, that throws everything we do in America on its head. Every election can be overturned with force at that point in time. And once you have that, you truly have a banana republic. So there's something to be said about an argument, whether you agree with it or otherwise, that what happened on January 6th from a constitutional and foundational perspective, from a democratic republic perspective, was more threatening than even 9/11 was.
Yeah, you can make that argument, but you would be wrong. Like, I might take that more seriously. I'm going to tell you why. I would take that more seriously if this were, say, like a militia group with an armed insurrection that was actually trying to overthrow the government. These were people wilding out because the election didn't go the way they wanted. These people were rioting. There was no way that these people were going to take on the most powerful government on earth with their fists and some sticks. So to me, yes.
They did it for several hours, though, Jeff. They did it for several hours.
They did not overthrow our federal government. They delayed a process. That's all they did. That's all they were able to do. Once that was done, they got right back in there. They certified the election, and it accomplished absolutely nothing. And the vast majority of people that are even on that same side were condemning them. So okay. I don't think this rises to 9/11 because 9/11 reshaped the entire geopolitical landscape, and not just in the United States, but in the rest of the world. So yeah, we can say that it's bad. It definitely was. There's no discounting that. But when people say that, oh, this was worse than 9/11, no, there's no way that January 6th impacted our country nearly as much as 9/11 did. And I'm not even just talking about the deaths. I'm talking about we got into 2 wars because of it. We just ended one of them earlier this year, or last year, I'm sorry.
I think the argument that I'm making is geopolitically you're correct. Constitutionally and foundationally, 9/11 brought more Americans together It actually unified the country for about a year. Whereas January 6th, if it's successful, let's say look, McKinley got shot in Buffalo by some Yahoo, right? Hinckley almost took out Reagan, which would have changed the whole course of the Cold War, most likely, if he succeeds. John Wilkes Booth was a pissed off actor that took out the president that saved the United States of America as we know it. So assassin bullets are not usually done by people that have these great plans that are military strategists. They're yahoos that lucked up. And if this crew on January 6th, 2021 was 15 minutes faster, they get the pens. And we don't know what transpires then because, look, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, things like that happen like that. So there's an argument to be made that constitutionally and foundationally, this was on the level of a 9/11 of a threat to the Republic. Whereas 9/11, they tried to come after the Republic and it backfired because the whole world united against the United States of America. I understand your point, but I think that there's at least a valid argument to what I'm proposing, or let me rephrase that. That some,
I think if they had succeeded,
I don't know if I'm proposing
I could go
but
with
some have proposed that.
Yeah, if they had succeeded, then I might be more amenable to your argument, definitely. And I don't even know what success would have looked like because I don't know what they actually plan to do. But let's say they did what you said, then yeah, I would put that on par with 9/11 if they had actually done it.
Let's get back to the root question that I asked. I mean, this is us showing off our chops a little bit, or showing off how stupid we are, depending on how you feel about me and Jeff. But let's get back to the root question, which is, and Jeff answered it, Dr. Metzler. People are looking at all this stuff going on. They can either do one of two things. They can do what Priscilla and now Jeff has said, which is, I'm not even getting caught up in that. I don't care if you put it on prime time and you have the Rockettes on there. I don't care about that hearing because I can't find baby formula.
Well, yeah.
Everything's going to hell, and I don't trust Biden because Biden's not making me reassured. He was supposed to make me reassured in 2021, and he's never done it. And the people that are running for office don't reassure me. The new candidates coming in don't reassure me what's happening to my country. It could be the hearing could have that effect on people too. Maybe.
Well, maybe, but let's look at what this hearing is going to be. This is going to be a Hollywood production. I guarantee.
So the Rockettes are going to be there.
Yeah,
well, that's New York. My bad.
That's right. But this is going to be a very slick Hollywood production type thing. Some candidates running for office who believe that in their district this will sell will in fact take pieces from that hearing and use that to cut TV ads, etc., etc. The thing I would say, though, about the panel itself, this is where I blame McCarthy for lack of leadership. He knew the Democrats were going to say, I don't want that person. And then what did Republicans do? They said, we're going to take our ball and go away. I still would have nominated some other folks to put on that panel. I think it was extremely short-sighted of him to take his ball and go home, because then I think you would have ended up with a different structure. But he chose politically, okay, I just won't appoint anyone. That's too short-sighted. But again, I think what you're going to see here is you're going to see a production, clips of which you will see in ads in districts in which they believe that's going to play. Now, whether they're correct or not, who knows? But they can't just run on that alone. See, here's what Democrats plan to do from an election standpoint. A combination of the Supreme Court case, Roe versus Wade, which will be overturned, 9/11. They're also going to just kind of talk about this entire, what they call insurrection thing. I don't know how well that plays without first of all, it requires them to walk and chew gum at the same time. That's a difficult task. And so they're not going to be able to do all of those things. And I think that's where they're going to make a significant mistake.
Let me ask this question before we get out of here, and I'm going to ask it around the group. I'm going to start with Priscilla. You know, all of this kind of reminds me. I was sitting there thinking this, going through your answers and listening, and it reminds me of the early 1970s, going on through the Watergate. You have OPEC crisis, and OPEC announced that they're going to increase production, so that may alleviate gas prices, but that's not going to kick in until July and August, and you're going to still feel angst. It still has to get through the pipeline, proverbially and literally speaking. As a result, you're not going to necessarily see those prices go down as fast as you'd like. But yeah, the OPEC crisis of the 1970s, you had inflation, you had a recession, and you had political corruption that led to, you know, both the president and the vice president getting into trouble, and the president resigning. Eventually, you had Reagan come along, and even with that, it took Reagan 2 to 3 years to really get footing underneath him to get the country turning back around, working with Tip O'Neill, and then pushing back on the evil empire, getting to the '84 election, and then America started having wind at its sails finally. But that took 10 plus years. And if you go back to 68, which I conclude our 2020 is our modern day 68, that's 15 years where a presidential figure, movement, whatever, turns stuff around. Priscilla, it doesn't seem like we have too many stoic statesmen, stateswomen that want to be that person. And so if there is, who could it be? And if there's not, how do we turn this around? Because, you know, people are starting to forget that we're in year 3 of this pandemic and all of its effects. The George Floyd effect, the recession effect, the inflation effect, the spike in crime effect, the geopolitical effect. 2019, where the economic times are good, seems like 30 years ago at this point in time.
Well, I think that the Republican Party has a pretty good bench of potential nominees. DeSantis's name keeps coming up. I think he's got what it takes to lead. Whether this is going to be the year, 2024, if that's the year for him, remains to be seen. But when I look around and I see a lot of the governors who made some really good decisions for their states, I think I'm personally hopeful. And I agree with Dr. Metzler about the January 6th committee. Where's the faith in that committee? And when we do take over Congress in November, they're probably going to dissolve that committee. And so this is their attempt, the left's attempt, to try to convince people that, once again, that the Democrats are right and that Republicans are a bunch of crazy wackos and you can't vote for us. But if we take a serious look at the damage that's been done and the lack of solutions and the rhetoric and the talking points, whether it's taking our guns away, Democrats are not going to be taking our guns away, first of all. I mean, so if they wanted to, they could have when they've had supermajority. Look around. People need to wake up and say, when they say, oh, we care about gun ownership and we want to do this and the Republicans are blocking, it's like the Democrats will never take our guns away. It's their opportunity to every election cycle use it as a dividing point for us as Americans. Constitutionally, they can't take our guns, number one. And number two, they don't want to because they can continue to run campaigns on it. Because if they really wanted to take our guns away in a lot of places where they have a supermajority, they could do it, and they don't do it. It's the same with a lot of policies. So the Democrats can't be trusted. They're not solution oriented. They're throwing everything to the wall to see if it sticks, just like they did in the governor's race in Virginia, where they start bringing in people and say, well, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? No, nothing's going to work for you Democrats this November, period.
Jeff, what say you? Like I said, 15 years from, heck, you can even go back to 63 to 83, where it's 20 years of presidential civil rights leaders being assassinated, war, inflation, economic hardship, presidential resignation, the crisis of confidence that Carter talked about in the mid to late 70s, all the way through. who or what is really focused on turning us away from that, getting the arc of history bending back towards, you know, American exceptionalism, as we used to call it back in the 80s and 90s?
You know, right now it's really hard to say. I mean, I do think that the Republicans do have a decent bench, at least more so than Democrats. They don't really have anybody who's stepping up. I mean, the person who's in charge, who's supposed to be the leader of the party, isn't really the leader of the party. Like, Joe Biden doesn't have nearly the level of influence in the Democratic Party as somebody like Trump or DeSantis does on the right. So I think that we do have to be looking towards the Republican Party, because there's a very good chance that they will be back in power soon, and it's going to have to come from there. But my concern is that, especially when it comes to Congress, we'll have a bunch of people in there who don't have much substance. We've talked about this before,
right,
that are more interested in getting clicks and getting into Twitter feuds than they are on legislating. But I think along with that, we have to have at least a few who want to lead us into the right direction. But I'm just not sure what that's going to look like. I mean, our society is still pretty divided. I think most people get along, but there are people who want to see us more divided. And when you look at the polling, even when you look at racial issues, the perception of it has gotten worse. People feel like we are going backwards. I'm not saying that we're back in the 60s, but they feel like the tensions between minorities and whites have regressed. That could lead to a lot more violence. We just saw this shooting in Buffalo that was racially based, and race is a very great way to divide people. It's a very effective political weapon. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to see this happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was an uptick in politically motivated violence. And I'm not sure that we have the people who are willing to have the honest conversations, and the people in office who really want to do something about it. So it's hard for me to even predict.
Dr. Metzler,
yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And look, from the standpoint of Republicans, I do agree. There is a decent bench. What we don't have are messages that are resonating with everyone, not just the base. We still don't get. This is not a base election. It is base plus. And I just don't think that we're going to do that. And finally, should Republicans take over the House, then you'll have a new minority leader in the Democratic Party in the form of Hakeem Jeffries from New York. That changes the party dramatically moving forward.
Folks, make sure you're catching up to a fresh perspective with Jeff Charles, because he's fresh. Make sure you catch up with Dr. Metzler, because he's fresh, because he's in Grenada. And make sure you catch up with Priscilla Wrong, because she's just all that in a bag of chips. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe us here, Red and Black, on the Red State channel. We appreciate you joining us every week. I know this is a shorter episode, but just like last week, we're going to give you something juicy in the middle of the week to kind of whet your appetite even more for Red and Black. I promise we'll dig more into contemporary issues next week, but we're going to also probably continue the conversation in regards to what should we be doing as conservatives and as Black conservatives to move the ball along. I think we've ignored that conversation for far too long, and I think probably it's time for real thought leadership to really start emerging more and more, which is why I just ask the questions and I let these smart people answer those questions. So I want you to make sure you join us in doing that. And meanwhile, enjoy your work week. We'll catch up to you soon, and look out for that bonus episode as well. PCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.